going to jump right in there. So, I don't think we can carry on referring to you as a former public protector. I think we have to find a different title. I understand that we are very privileged today to have that you're giving us an announcement. And there's some confusion out there in the public as to whether you are getting a Stellenbosch, whether you're going to get a Harvard, where are you going, what does 2017 hold, and 2018? And it's hard to believe, but I think right now America probably needs you as much as
Greetings, friends, and greetings to the club leadership, and greetings to everyone here. Thank you for the opportunity to engage with you this morning. I do wish you a lovely new year, and I hope this year is the one you've been waiting for. Where am I right now? I left office in October, and I've started at Harvard in December as a fellow in the Advanced Leadership Fellowship. It's called the Advanced Leadership Initiative, ALI. It is a fellowship of the has-beens. It's people who have been sort of at the pinnacle of their career of some sort, and who are working out what to do in their next chapter. If they know already what they're going to do in the next chapter, then they're using Harvard as a crucible for developing whatever the idea they have for the next chapter. With retired presidents of companies, senior civil servants, and other people who have been at the top of their career. I will be at Stellenbosch the beginning of next year. I've chosen the project I'll do at Stellenbosch as my Harvard project, which is starting a center for social justice, whilst also being part of the law faculty on social justice. And hopefully I'll be joining the bar here in Cape Town as an advocate on a part-time basis. And at the level of civil society, we are in the process of launching a foundation, a private foundation in my name, it is the Thuli Madonsela Foundation, but that goes under the name Tuma Foundation. And as part of that foundation, we will be working primarily with young people to develop an approach to leadership that is purposeful, impactful, and that is ethical, purposeful, impactful, and committed to service. We'll talk more about that later if you're interested. Okay.
Thank you. Which brings me, okay, you've mentioned a number of qualities that leadership requires. Just looking at your term of office, how you must have envisaged when you signed up for the job and when you were appointed, you must have had some idea of, okay, this is what the Public Protector Office is. I mean, after all, you did help draft the Constitution. And then, how different was the experience once you were in that office? How different was it from what you had envisaged?
When I started, and obviously when I was involved in drafting the Constitution, I saw the Public Protector as a refuge for those who have been treated wrongly by somebody exercising public power or controlling state resources. And I recall that when I spoke to the committee, and during the interviews, I spoke about the Public Protector being an umbrella of some sort where people could find some shade when they have been wronged by government. And in the early years of Public Protector, we spoke about the Public Protector being like the Venda McCarthy, being the voice of the people and the conscience of the state. However, when I was in office, I found that the pub protector was more than that. It was really a catalyst for change, helping the people to be their own liberators. In the end, what we did was really to serve as a link between the people and the state. Instead of giving people the voice, instead of being the voice of the people, we gave people their own voice. We sat around the table and had people speaking in their own voices. Ours was not to be the umbrella, but we were the facilitator, getting to people to hold accountable whoever had exercised public power allegedly wrongfully. Be it president or a cleaner in government, we got anybody in the public to sit around the table with those in public power to hold them accountable. So in the end, I think we started being part of this conversation that helps the public to stop outsourcing democracy to courts, politicians, and state institutions, to get back into the democracy game and be actors rather than just observers in their own democracy.
So to some extent, you're saying that the job description, as it were, is set by the public, by the complaints that the public brings to your office to address. But obviously one has to, I'm sure there's a lot, and one has to prioritize, and one has to, now, I'm certainly not asking you to write the job description for the next public protector, but what do you see as where that office, where can that office go? Where should its priorities be? Where should its focus be going forward, given the challenges facing South Africa?
I believe that the office is going in the right direction. It's not my place, of course, to dictate to my successor where to go, but from what I've noted is that they will be enhancing the process of involving the grassroots. You will recall that under my term, we had stakeholder conversations once a year, where we went to the most remote of societies, mostly border towns and townships, and we got people to get to know, firstly, how democracy works, where the public protector fits into it, and how they can use the public protector in other democracy institutions to engage meaningfully with those they've entrusted with public power and resources. So I think that's the direction in which the public protector is going, is empowering the people and making the office accessible to all. The second area is obviously the issue of combating corruption. When I entered the space as the public protector, there had been the scorpions. Hence, my predecessors had primarily focused on administrative justice. Not necessarily because that was the only area where the office should focus, but because the space on corruption was occupied meaningfully by the scorpions. In recent years, there has been a fight against corruption by all of the other institutions, but the most important thing about the public protector is that it's the most arm's length from government of all institutions that are supporting constitutional democracy. Therefore, going forward, it's going to be important for the public protector to support a process of creating public protector-like institutions in municipalities. That's the process we have started. Because we'll never be able to save everybody on little Gogothameni matters. So our strategy was to help municipalities create their own ombudsman institutions and provinces to do so in government institutions. What then it meant was we would then increasingly only be left with the big ones. And why the public protector should be left with the big ones is because of its independence and the ability to act without any influence or capture by powerful forces within government.
Now, a difficult question, in a way, a ticklish one. When you left office, I'm just trying to picture your desk. And what was on that desk? What have you left? sitting on the top, and what was in the first drawer?
Well, there were lots of things that were left, and I'm sure the public would know the big one being the state capture report that was delivered after I left office, because it was signed, but because of a court process, I couldn't release it. So that was a finished one from the point of view of the power protector. The vision at that stage was that the power protector will play a role of enforcing the remedial action, which would be to work with the public to compel the president to establish a commission of inquiry to make sure that there was an open process to confirm whether indeed there is undue influence by the Zuma and Gupta families in the appointment of certain ministers and board members in state institutions. And I thought at the time, together with the team, that this process does need a commission of inquiry because the power protector's resources are limited, and the process also needs to be transparent. It's a highly charged matter, politically and emotionally. And the best way to resolve it is to have an open and transparent process where each party can say, this is what happened, and this is what I did, and this is not what I did. You do know that it came because the Deputy Minister of Finance alleged that he was given the job of his colleague by a certain family known as the Gupta family, and the job was offered to him corruptly because he was asked to take the job provided he was going to dishonestly bend policies to favor companies linked to the Zuma Gupta families. And he was also asked to take money, apart from the job, to take money, 600,000 in a bag, and 600 million to come later. That is what he alleged. For us, it was important then that this would be investigated because, as you know, it has paralyzed the state. It has created suspicion among members of cabinet. It has exacerbated an already existing trust deficit between the public and government. And the only way the air can be cleared is if a commission of inquiry chaired by a judge scrutinizes this matter. It may well be that the Deputy Minister was not telling the truth. We'll never know until we look into it. But the matter also needed to be looked into because Ms. Mento, a former MP, came out and said, I was also offered a deal, and I went all the way from Cape Town to a meeting organized by the presidency to meet with the president. Instead, I was collected by a member of the Gupta family from the airport and landed up in Saxonwold for a meeting where the president was sitting in another room when this offer was made. And when I told him about the corrupt deal, being unhappy about it, the president didn't seem to mind. Again, that's an allegation. She may well be lying, but we need to know whether she's lying or not. Mr. Masego also alleged that he was pressured by both the president and Mr. A.J. Gupta to give business to the new agent LNN7, and he was called to do so at Saxonwold. Again, Mr. Masego may well be lying, but from where I was sitting together with my team, this matter needed to be scrutinized urgently, transparently, and put to rest. If these people were lying, then there should be consequences for them lying. But if they were telling the truth, then we needed to put the stop, because no family should alone be controlling power and state resources. It is meant to be a democracy, And democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people.
Are you facing, are you still being hounded in some way? Are there charges against you? Are there court cases? Are people still trying to silence you post holding the office?
I heard from the media that the current public protector had laid charges in the police regarding the release of the verbal or of the audio part of the conversation with the president. If you know, or if any of you have been following media reports on the state capture investigation, I had a meeting with the president on the 6th of October, which had been publicized widely as the meeting where the president was finally going to give me his side of the story, having been informed that he was being investigated for possible corruption in the removal of the Minister of Finance from office and the appointment of his successor. And at that meeting, we told the president that we are recording this interview for his own protection and for our protection, so that it's clear what was said and what wasn't said. And we had a big contraption. Unfortunately, our recording machinery is not a small pen that spies use or something like that. It is something that has two speakers, one speaker by the side of the president and one speaker by my side, and so we had that open thing. We even said if they want a copy of that audio or transcript, it would be given to them. And whilst Public Protector, soon after that meeting, when it became clear that the agreement we had reached, that we will continue the conversation on the 10th, having been supplied with the answers that I had requested from the president, and with him having undertaken during that meeting of the 6th to provide the said answers, when that didn't happen and we were informed that I'm now being taken to court on an interdict whilst I'm sitting in my office waiting for answers, I told the team that the record must be made public. And I then heard that my successor had instituted criminal proceedings about the release. And that was after I had gone public to say I'm the one who released that record. And my understanding is two things, is that when I was public protector, I was the only one who had the power to release those records. And after I was no longer public protector, after the report had been released, the matter was a public matter and it can't be a crime for any of the evidence to go public, because the Act talks about during an investigation.
I don't believe that anybody is fearless. I think we all suffer fear, but you might persuade me to think otherwise, that there are such people. In your term of office, you faced incredible pressure and also personal vilification. We know you work for the CIA, etc. And you're funded by foreign governments. But how do you maintain that? How did you maintain? And I think this comes back to what we were talking about with your foundation, where you're going to be talking about integrity and people trying to hang on to that and preserve themselves. Where did you find that strength, and what would your advice be to anybody in that office to maintain that integrity and dignity?
The strength for me comes from many places. I would say, as a human being, it firstly comes from me being grounded. Spiritually, I believe there is God, and I believe that God supports me. I also believe that it's not an accident that I became public protector. I believe that at a meeting such as this one, I had a young lady come up to me and said, "Look at Esther. I've listened to you. Check Esther in the Bible about the possibility that you were born for a time like this." And throughout my term as a pop protector, I felt that whatever me and my team did, we were born for a time like that. But it wasn't seen as a one person's crusade. I always saw myself as part of a committed team that sought to do its work as ethically as possible, as impactfully, purposefully as possible, with a commitment to service. That's how I came up with this epic leadership concept. We also drew our strength from the people themselves, the people who entrusted us with whatever had happened to them, the whistleblowers who had been fired wrongfully, such as the one I was talking to a colleague earlier this morning about a story where somebody was fired and the reasons given was that she was rude and hierarchical. And we had never seen anybody being dismissed for rude and hierarchical. Of course, if you want somebody to tone down their leadership style or management style, you supervise them, you coach them, and they tone it down. But clearly she had whistleblown, and I found that really the real reasons for dismissal was the whistleblowing. And last week she called me to indicate that the remedial action was going to be implemented. So it's people like her who stick their necks out in the quiet spaces where they work, where there's not going to be glory, where actually the consequences of them sticking their necks out is more likely to be gloom rather than glory, as we did as the Pop Protector South Africa. I also find my strength in the Gogo Dlaminis who, even if they are just ordinary people, they believe in this country. They believe in constitutional democracy. They believe in us who are in powerful positions, that when they entrust us with their cases, we'll do the right thing. We will not look at who is complaining and who is in power. We will just look at what do the facts say, what do laws and policies say, is there discrepancy between what happened and what should have happened? And if so, is it enough of a discrepancy for us to call it improper conduct? And if it was improper conduct, who was harmed? Was it a person? Was it society? And how do we fix it? And those are things that really motivated me on a day-to-day basis. But I would say ultimately, what kept me and the team going was knowing that we're making a difference. That every day, even the Gogo Dlaminis that we never see, whose faces we never see when the remedy is implemented, we just know that we've made people's lives better. And that would be thousands and thousands of lives that we impacted, because the majority of cases that we dealt with as a pop protector would be those of ordinary people who were affected by administrative injustice. But even on the cases of corruption, my team and I were motivated by the fact that when we claw back resources from corrupt users, we take back that money and we invest it in pursuing that dream that inspired the activities of people like Pixley Kaseme, like Olive Schreiner, Oliver Tambo, Helen Suzman, Ellen Joseph, all of those people who really thought that the best way for all of us is to create a society where everyone's potential is freed and everyone's life is improved. If we do that, if we create that socially just society, we all have a better guarantee for security and peace.
Yes, I think that as a country we've actually been very lucky because certain individuals have time and time again have appeared at the moment that was right in our history. We've had that many times. I think you joined that august list now. But you mentioned trust deficit earlier, and I know Hlumela Biko, for instance, writes about, you know, what underlies this corruption. How is it that people think they can act with such impunity? And he attributes it a lot to a lack of trust, a lack of sense of co-ownership in the post-1994 dispensation. People who don't, they really don't feel that, they don't feel their office. They see it as a position to be used for their personal gain, and that social contract in a way is broken. How are we going to try and counteract that going forward?
Repairing the trust is part of the job of Chapter 9 institutions. Chapter 9 institutions are created to support and strengthen constitutional democracy. And if democracy is the government of the people, by the people, for the people, then dialogue between those who have been entrusted with public power and the general public is extremely important. And institutions such as the Public Protector are important for repairing that dialogue if it's broken. But beyond those institutions, we've seen last year through the Fees Must Fall movement, Roads Must Fall, and Outsourcing Must Fall, people rising and being their own liberators, as Justice Moseneke says. That for me is part of repairing trust, because you don't engage if you totally don't trust the people you're talking to. So even though we do have a trust deficit, I don't think people in South Africa have given up on the democracy project. I think the fact that they engaged, and through engagement, things were changed. If we look at lots of universities stopped outsourcing or started processes to improve outsourcing and bettered the lives of workers, where workers were, your general workers were not allowed to study for free. They didn't have their families with privileges to study for free, and were temporary workers for periods over 10 years. So students took that up, and there was somebody who listened. Things were changed. On the Fees Must Fall, things are not yet where they should be, but a lot of progress has been made since the young ones took up the whole challenge about social injustice and access to education. For me, I see us moving into that space and building that kind of dialogue, strengthening institutions and building that kind of dialogue. Through, for example, the Tuma Foundation, we see ourselves partnering with all citizens in South Africa and in the continent to work with young people to strengthen leadership skills for peaceful change, to create the kind of leader that sees themselves not just as a power monger, but as a kind of leader who sees themselves as a change maker in their own community, literally building the community they want to live in, whilst finding out who's supposed to be doing what from government and holding them accountable for partnering with communities to improve themselves. So I really think that things are going to get better.
That's a very positive note for us to end the discussion section. I'm going to take questions from the floor. I would like to first open it to members of the press, please. Are there any questions? Any questions? We do have a microphone to go around as well. You seem to have... Yeah, it's okay. We can take your first question to get the ball
Well,
rolling.
I'm an ex-member of the press, not anymore.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Sorry, I'm no longer a member of the press, but seeing as there are no other takers, I'll take the opportunity. Arising from your last comment on fees must fall, my question is, when there was a peace meeting at WITS, which I suppose one can see is rebuilding trust, Adam Habib was forcibly chased out. You were at that meeting. You didn't, as far as was reported, do anything to prevent that and to open dialogue. My question is, why not? And then my second question is on the ABSA Reserve Bank lifeboat issue. There were two judicial commissions of inquiry, one under Mr. Justice Davis and one under Heath. Why was it necessary to reopen that investigation?
Thank you. Let me start with the Adam Habib matter. When Professor Habib was chased out, I wasn't there personally. I arrived much later in the evening, and I spoke about the need to strengthen dialogue. And I remember at that meeting, I also spoke about the fact that there was a misunderstanding that Professor Habib had been responsible for preventing Mr. Mcebo Dlamini from getting bail. And on my way to that meeting, I spoke to Professor Habib, and I got information that he had not been responsible. In fact, he had offered to assist Mcebo even get alternative accommodation during the time of bail, and he had presented to court that Wits was not opposed to bail, which would appear then that the prosecution had went on its own and opposed bail without Wits having opposed bail. I also had confirmed from Professor Habib that it wasn't Wits that had instituted those criminal proceedings against Mcebo Dlamini. Throughout Wits, I have, together with the Wits Crisis Committee members, been acting as go-betweens. Some of it doesn't play out in public. We speak to the parties concerned quietly, and that's part of the Rolf Mayor Cyril Ramaphosa negotiation process that is often looked at as an alternative form of mediation, where not all of it is done in an open platform, but in between you talk to the parties. It wasn't proper that Professor Habib was treated in the manner he was treated, but I have great respect for how he has handled it. I have great respect for the fact that he has understood that he is a person with enormous power. And because he has enormous power, he has to understand that violence is the language of the disempowered. And he doesn't have to descend the arena to the level of the students who feel disempowered. He has exercised enormous restraint. The students on the other side, I do not agree with some of their methods. The leadership of the students also does not always agree with the methods of some of the general student body. But when people are angry, they often do things they wouldn't do when they're not angry. At a meeting with the Prime Minister of Lesotho last year, he spoke to us about a particular animal which, when angry, it scratches itself to the point where it disembowels itself. And that's what happens when people have been so disempowered. They may engage in methods of wanting to be heard that are not always acceptable or even advantageous to them. But what we need to do as members of the public, though, we must be careful that we don't condemn the cause. We separate some of the behaviors from the cause, because the cause behind the Fees Must Fall movement is real. I had alerted Parliament to this problem before it became a crisis, because at UP, for example, when my daughter went there for the first time 2 years ago, she found people literally living in bathrooms in libraries. She collected some of them and put them in her one-bedroom flat and for a little while, but that was a temporary solution. But then the students there at UP worked with the university to get those students accommodation, and the university was very gracious in responding to this reality. And I would just say, before we condemn, we have to walk in people's shoes, because I think it's Carver who says, seek first to understand before you can be understood. My approach is seek first to understand before you can persuade, because if people don't feel that you feel their pain, they don't care what you think. Okay, then there was the second question, Sam, about why did I investigate the lifeboat matter, given the fact that a judicial inquiry had taken place. I'm glad you've asked that, because there has been newcomers into this thing who have become modern day heroes. You know, they always talk about struggle heroes and peacetime heroes. So there are peacetime heroes that came towards the end of that investigation and made a lot of noise about I'm not investigating, etc. The reality is that this matter, the real complainant is Advocate Paul Hoffman, sitting over there.
Who has the next question, by the way?
Okay, maybe we should let Advocate Paul Hoffman ask his question, because I suspect it's related. Then I can respond fully to the Ciex investigation. Thank you.
Your suspicions are well-founded. Thank you for making time for the press club. Like Anton, I am concerned about the most recent developments in relation to the Ciex investigation, which, as you and I know, but the press doesn't seem to know, is about a lot more than just the Absa lifeboat. It's about the looting and plundering that took place at the end of the apartheid era. But let's just deal with what's going on now, because there are a couple of questions that I think are quite important and that you are in a position to shed light on them. These lifeboats, were they gifts? Were they loans? Or were they illegal, disguised transactions that are invalid? Different people have had different answers to that question, but I know that you, at my request, have been working on it since July 2011, when we had a bus ride in Barcelona together. And the benefit of your insights into that, I think, are important. Then in relation to what's happened in the last week, I'd like to know whether on your watch at the Public Protector, the mechanism of a notice to a detrimentally affected party was ever used, or whether your modus operandi was to put out a confidential and secure the confidentiality provisional report so that those involved would have a chance to feed back to you on their perspectives before going public. Did you regard the Section 7(9) procedure as a tool in your arsenal? Did you ever use it? And do you believe that it ought to be dealt with on a confidential basis?
Thank you.
Sorry, that's quite a mouthful, but I think you see where I'm coming from.
Right. Thank you, Advocate Paul Hoffman. Some of your questions I can't answer, but I can answer the last one, is that the modus operandi regarding a provisional report remains the same. It's a confidential report initially given to those who are affected or implicated, and then having heard their views, then given to the authority that needs to implement. So I suspect that is still the methodology, but as you know, in the past, we also had stolen reports. As a result, we chose towards the end not to send out a complete provisional report. We were no longer sending out provisional reports under my watch. We would only send a Section 79 notice to an affected party so that nobody who receives the report would have the full puzzle. Each one would have a piece of the puzzle that relates to them, and therefore they would not make out what have we said to the other party. I don't know if the Public Protector still sticks to that. The second thing that we had resolved to do towards the end, we were not sending any of the reports electronically. We would only send them a hard copy delivered to a specific person so that we would know who was it given to should it leak and which version of the reports had leaked. But I don't know how the committee, how the Public Protector deals with it right now. As you know, I've been out of office since mid-October. Regarding the issue, let me then go back to the colleague's question. Why did I investigate this matter? Advocate Paul Hoffman has given a partial answer. He asked me to investigate this matter. But Advocate Paul Hoffman, you're also omitting something, because this matter has been turned into a black and white matter. So the initiator of this investigator, as you can see, is a white, blonde man. Is he blonde? A blue-eyed blonde man. So that's him, Advocate Paul Hoffman. It wasn't initiated by a black person. But he's not the initiator. The initiator of this investigation is Mr. Michael Oatley, a former MI6 spy. Is it MI6? MI5. A former MI5 spy, UK spy. I'm told, though, that there's nothing like a former spy. Once a spy, always a spy. I'm talking a real spy, not the one that is circulating. By the way, the spy people, they're circulating it again. Now they've changed it, lest the badge no longer has my name, at least it only has my picture. But still, it's still a stupid CIA because the picture is still the one that was on the profile of the Public Protector. So I would have thought that if you're a spy agency, you've got your own cameras. So you take pictures of you, but let's leave it at that. So Michael Oatley is the real initiator of that investigation and approached Advocate Paul Hoffman to... The other way around. I approached him to see if it was a work of fiction. Right, okay. So that's what he said, though, that he had approached. But okay, we'll leave it at that. It's okay, but he investigated this matter. He wants his money. Because he approached the government of South Africa and said, there's money that was stolen on the eve of democracy. And it was siphoned to various places, and I can help get that money. Pay me 100 UK pounds per month. I will deliver that money. 100,000 UK pounds, I will deliver that money. So that, he approached President Nelson Mandela, not President Thabo Mbeki. It was President Nelson Mandela who was approached. This was around between 96 and 97. And President Nelson Mandela, being approached by a spy, then shifted this matter to the intelligence services. So this whole thing was handled by Mr. Billy Masetla, and the agreement was signed between Mr. Michael Oatley and Mr. Billy Masetla, and the matter was handled as a security matter. And the agreement was that you will deliver the money. So sometime around 1998, Michael Oatley delivered the Ciex report, the first draft of the Ciex report. Who was the president in 1998? President Nelson Mandela. That's the report that we have. Okay, it was revised a bit around 2002, but when it was delivered then, the government, then the Reserve Bank, was, no, after it was delivered, I think in 1998, there was a change of government in 1999, and Tito Mboweni became the governor of the Reserve Bank, and he appointed Dennis Davis, who had a committee that included the former governor of England, McMahon, and others that investigated this matter and came to a particular conclusion. Around the same time, Judge Heath, who was the head of the SIU at the time. So there was no commission of inquiry. It was a Davis commission. Was it a commission or a panel? I don't think it was a presidential commission of inquiry. It was a panel appointed by the governor of the Reserve Bank. And Judge Heath, as part of the Heath Commission, was given a presidential proclamation to investigate it, and he also investigated it. And their reports are public information in terms of what were their findings. The one found no wrongdoing. Judge Davis found there was wrongdoing, but that it was the recoverability of the funds was a technicality that could not be surmounted in his point of view. That was 1990. That was around 2000. And then Michael Oatley then revived this matter again, I think around 2002, 2001 or so, wrote back to government to say he's seen Davis Commission, etc. He thinks the money can still be recoverable. Or he had said it's not recoverable because it would cause a run on the bank, and a run on ABSA would be a run on the banking industry, and a run on the banking industry would be a run on the rand, and would have a systemic impact on our economy. That's what he had said. Because of the systemic impact, then don't recover it. But all of them thought the money needed to go back. That's public information. It has nothing to do with the investigation, because I'm not here to disclose what is in the investigation. So Michael Oatley then approached government, I think around 2001, 2002, if I'm not mistaken, to say, no, if you collect this money incrementally, it won't have a systemic impact. And in any event, ABSA had made an arrangement to pay back this money on chunks of 100,000 rand or so a month. That was what Michael Oatley advised. Again, that's on the internet. That's just public knowledge. So this matter then comes to me years later. It's brought to me by Advocate Paul Hoffman in 2011. At the Power Protector South Africa, there are triaging teams in 20 offices that look at the matter. Is it on jurisdiction? Is it within jurisdiction? If it's in jurisdiction, can we handle it, or can somebody handle it? There's also the 2-year rule. It's not really prescription, but it says if it's over 2 years, there has to be compelling reasons to take it. And the team decided, no, it won't take it. And I met with the team, and they felt that the matter was old, and that it would be difficult to get the documents and to get the information. And then at the time we also thought that it happened before we came into existence. The Power Protector was established in 1995. Then we communicated to Advocate Paul Hoffman to say we're not going to handle this matter. Advocate Paul Hoffman and I are members of the World Justice Forum, which focuses on the rule of law and tries to involve civil society in the rule of law beyond lawyers and parliamentarians. And during that bus ride, he then asked me to investigate, and he said it was low-lying fruit. Already the money, ABSA is ready to pay. Of the 26 billion, the money was not just the ABSA lifeboat, it was several lifeboats that amounted to about 26 billion. And other monies that were allegedly stolen, not necessarily as lifeboats. If you can read a book by Julian Askin, dangerous deceits, where he talks about this matter. Anyway, to cut the long story short, then he convinced us that we could do it. But also he said at the time that we have to only look at government's action at the time of receiving the reports there, which is, we're not investigating what happened to the lifeboat. Was the money stolen? Was the money borrowed? We're just only investigating that when a report was given to this government after the Power Protector came into existence, this is post-1998, was it processed properly, or was there maladministration in processing that report? And if there was maladministration, was harm occasioned to the nation? So we then, on the basis of that, I investigated, did a preliminary first, interviewed the Minister of Finance, and interviewed Reserve Bank, and then eventually I've interviewed virtually everyone: Chris Stolz, former Reserve Bank Governor, President Thabo Mbeki, Frank Chikane, and former Minister of Finance, Trevor Manuel, current Minister of Finance, and Mr. Billy Masetla, and ultimately Michael Oatley in London was also interviewed. Regarding, do I regard it as a lifeboat or as a gift? Already Judge Davis answered that question about this transaction having been a wrong transaction. So that was not really an issue. For us was the money payable, and was the money paid, and we didn't have to go into whether it was a wrong deal or right deal. We went into the agreement itself, whether the agreement said the money was payable, and if the agreement said the money was payable, was it paid? And what findings did we arrive at, I can't say at this stage. Secondly, we had to answer the question of legally, is the money now recoverable? We firstly had to look at the behavior of government on receiving the Davis report and receiving the Heath report to say, was there wrongdoing in how those reports were dealt with? And based on that, then we arrived at the conclusion that I arrived at. When I left, we had concluded a provisional report. It was really just an administrative error that prevented me from signing that report. Another question I'm not going to answer is the alleged current report the same as mine? History will just tell the truth about what I concluded and what is now on the table.
Thank you for that clarifying. We are extremely pressed for time right now. That question was one of the first hands that went up at the table there. We're going to keep the questions short.
Yes, it's very short. Public Protector, it seems to me that there's one matter of a kind of size in corruption in South Africa, which dwarfs the Nkandla matter substantially. And that was the one that regards a payment made to the owner of Molamala for 1.2 billion rand. This matter seems to have fallen into the sort of rabbit hole of the political landscape of corruption here. I wonder if you would be able to comment on that.
The payment made to whom, ma'am?
To Michael Rattray of Molamala. It was a land claim supposedly issued.
Oh, yes, yes.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that, yes, I do. It is one of those investigations that hadn't reached any very fruitful stage by the time I left. I remember having a meeting with Mr. Ngui, the Minister of Agriculture, after the request was made. And at that time, we were trying to stop the payment. And when I met with him, the payment had already been made. So the investigation, hopefully, is still proceeding.
Right. Right at the back. Yeah.
When you say hopefully, do you mean that it is going to be picked up by your successor? I suppose you wouldn't know that.
I would say by the time I left, the investigation was not concluded by my team, but also we hadn't issued a closing report. That's why I'm hoping then it's proceeding. It's just that one of the difficult things there is that you have an investigator that is handling more than 30 complex investigations, whereas ideally you should be having an investigator handling 2 or 3 complex investigations parallel to each other, or at best, only 1 complex investigation at a time. So it's almost like pushing bicycles. You push one and you put it there, then you go and collect the other one, and then the other one. Whilst you're pushing the one, the others seem to come to a standstill.
Okay, right at the back. Right. Sorry.
Thank you, Lester from eNCA. Advocate Madonsela, I'd just like to know, from the report that's been in the public domain since Friday regarding the APSA report, is there any substantive difference in what you had compiled? And secondly, have you noticed or note any amendments to any remedial action that has come out in this report by Advocate Mkhwebane?
Mr. Kivet, I just answered that question, that I choose not to comment. I do have a view on that, but I choose not to comment about whether that report is the same as the one I left, and whether or not both the conclusions about who did anything wrong and the remedial action are mine or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. Advocate Madonsela, my name is Joseph Mosia from SABC. My question is regarding the state capture report. Are you in a position to say why you specifically recommended that the Chief Justice be the one that appoints, that provides a name to the President of the head of the Commission of Inquiry?
Thank you, Mr. Mosia. The reason is stated in the report itself, sir. The reason says that it is to allow the President not to be a judge in his own cause. That is what is stated in the report. The idea being that it's such a divisive matter, the state capture. There's just so much mistrust attached to it. And the President is implicated because the allegation is not that it's just that the Gupta family has captured the state. It's that the Zuma Gupta family companies are getting involved in deciding who's going to become a minister and who is going to become a board member in parastatals, and that the parastatals that are affected by such appointments are then giving tenders and other preferential forms of treatment to the Zuma Gupta companies. So the President, therefore, is an interested party in this matter. But also he himself is alleged to have been involved in asking Mr. Masego to give tenders to the Zuma Gupta companies. He is also alleged to have sat in the room next to the meeting of Ms. Mento and to have been actually the originator of that meeting. There's also an allegation that the President asking Cabinet to get involved in the dispute between the banking industry and the Zuma Gupta companies was a conflict of interest and in violation of the Executive Ethics Code, which prevents a member of the executive from getting involved in a matter where they have an interest. Then you would say, but President Zuma does not have an interest, it's his son that has an interest. If you look at how we handled the IEC case and the fact that the courts agreed with us right to the Constitutional Court, our decision, or my decision as public protector, was that you have an interest not only when you have shares, when you have such a close relationship with the party who has a financial interest there, you too have an interest, and it then creates a conflict of interest. So because of that then, sir, I thought it would be in the interest of the president for him not to directly choose the person who is going to be the commissioner, but to appoint that person, the same way that Parliament chooses the power protector, but the president appoints the power protector. And I also was learning from the president himself. With Nkandla, he refused to decide how much he should pay and insisted that my remedial action be tweaked so that Treasury alone makes a decision. And in the report, I cite what he said in the Nkandla litigation to say that I'm aligning this with your preference. He still gets to a point, he just doesn't select.
At the back. And the question there.
Good morning, Advocate Madonsela. Alice Steen from Media 24 newspapers. Just given the timeline that you just gave us about the lifeboat issue, I was hoping that you could give your opinion as to the timing of the leaked report, given the narrative of state capture. And then, are you concerned that such an important issue, of money essentially belonging to the people of South Africa, may very well be used for narrow political interest and infighting? And then, thirdly, who, in your opinion, do you think is actually running South Africa?
Okay, ma'am, your questions were very fast. Is that, what's the name, ma'am? Alistair, you were very fast, ma'am. Can you just, the first one is, why did the one take longer?
The timing of the leaked report. I was asking you your opinion about the timing of the leaked report, given the broader narrative.
All right.
Yeah, that's the first question. The second one was basically this: are you concerned that this important issue of money essentially belonging to the people of South Africa might be abused for narrow political interests?
Okay, thank you, Alistair. I don't know about the timing of the leaked report, ma'am, because the leaking of reports has always been for nefarious purposes, even during my time. I do not know why it has been done at this stage, particularly because in this particular case, we had promised ABSA and the Reserve Bank to share the findings, or at least the provisional report with them quietly before moving forward. That doesn't mean that they would have changed it, but because of understanding that we're dealing with the financial services sector and we're dealing with our central bank, we had made that promise. How it ended up with other parties and how people claim to now have an electronic report, I do not understand how that happened, but I have no view on the timing, but will it be used for nefarious purposes? That is possible. But from our side, though, it was never about using this report for nefarious purposes. If anything, it is one of those things that proves that the power protector was always neutral. In this particular matter, from day one, there were those that felt that this horse has bolted, leave it alone. And there were those that felt strongly, or there was one person at the time that felt strongly this matter should be dealt with. I think it was Advocate Paul Hoffman and Miss Mercedes, Mercedes from SABC. There were just two people in the country. Pardon? Or Sylvia, it was Sylvia, Mercedes, and Advocate Paul Hoffman that felt strongly that this matter should be viewed. I do hope, though, from the public that when we deal with this matter, let us not take sides. Let us just look at what really happened there, and if what happened was proper, and deal with it appropriately. Regarding the legalities around it, you will see it when the final report comes out. I don't know if it's still there. Well, no. Okay, let me just leave it about what it contains. But I think from the public's point of view, we just need to look at it with cool heads and not allow it to be used to vilify people. One thing I was careful about was that I never looked at this as an opportunity to vilify anyone. That's why for me it was important to look at, after Heath and Davis had spoken, what would a reasonable government do? Right now with the arms deal, Seriti has spoken. What does a reasonable government do? So those are the questions you ask yourself, but it's still we have to ask ourselves, what happened to that money? And it's not just the money that we should be concerned about as a public, it's land. One of the cases I was dealing with that I hadn't finished was an allegation that some group got land initially as a community trust, but quickly converted it into private and now is benefiting commercially. So it becomes important that we follow these things with a calm and cool head and not look at who is who, look at what is the action complained about. Yes, 11, 12. Yes.
Sorry.
We still don't know who's running South Africa.
Officially, we know that we have a government, but on a serious note, if we don't get a commission of inquiry to test those allegations, there would always be a trust deficit. And some of the information I gathered during that investigation made me really, really worried about who really runs the country. There's a narrative that has emerged since I started the state capture report. Before the state capture report, I never used to hear the phrase white monopoly capital. As a student of politics, I learned at university that in Africa, when leaders are accused of corruption and bad governance, they whip up ethnicity as a big issue, and then they let people focus on ethnicity. So I'm not saying that there's no white monopoly capital. I'm just saying that the answer to white monopoly capital is not having two families advancing themselves through state resources. The answer to white monopoly capital is not people getting into public power as a vehicle for primitive accumulation of wealth. So that's the allegation in the state capture investigation. And you want to disprove that. You want to make sure that the state is neutral, the state acts rationally, the state acts as provided for in the Constitution and in the public interest. Thank you.
All right, thank you. There are a lot of hands going up. It's not a time limit that I'm imposing. There is actually a flight to be caught. So Paul Vecchiato, Donald Presley, Terry Crawford Brown, I've seen you all. I'm doing it in order of hands now. We have the question there.
Thank you. I'm Pepela P. Dube from the Center for Constitutional Rights. Advocate Matonsela, do you have any regrets in the time that you were at the helm of the Public Protector Office?
Pardon, ma'am?
Do you have any regrets in the time that you were in the office, whether pertaining to any recommendations for remedial action that you were given, or any of the manner in which you conducted yourself concerning relationships, either with family or politicians, etc.? Just any regrets in looking back at your time at the helm?
I do have lots of regrets, especially about not engaging with the public about ethics early enough. Because if you look at a lot of the fight back or the backlash against me as the power protector had always to do with the fact that there didn't seem to be a very clear understanding of what was the correct behavior. And people could play victim. And if we had heard a conversation early enough about what do you expect from somebody who holds office? Should they tell the truth? Yes. Should they be accountable? Yes. Can they promote themselves or somebody close to themselves through state resources and public power? No. Things like that. If we had heard such conversations earlier, I think that there wouldn't have been space for some of the conversations that emerged afterwards. I also believe that I should have had more quiet conversations with Cabinet to just renew the common ground. Because as a power protector, you don't make the rules, you just enforce them. When then you part ways on the interpretation of the rules, that means there's no common ground on what does the Constitution mean, what does the law mean, etc. But also at the level of then building stronger systems in the office, we were still in the process of doing that, particularly our digitalized case management system. That's something I would have wanted to have done more. Thank you.
Over there.
Yes. A sort of a follow-on to that, the one that got away, is there anything you would like to have investigated or that you didn't have a chance to, either because you saw it but nobody wrote to the office or presented it, or just the one that got away, as it were?
Yes, thank you so much. And in fact, that's something that links to the colleague, ma'am, about what I regret, the land question. When Judge Bam was about to die, he had requested me to investigate corruption in land redistribution, and ma'am, they raised that question as well. So that's something I would have wanted to do, a systemic investigation on land redistribution. Firstly, in terms of the structures that we've created, the trusts and the community property associations, whether they're the best vehicle for handling these very important resources for our people. And secondly, to look at the delays in cases, etc., and allegations about changing the names of beneficiaries. There's lots of alleged corruption, and Judge Bam believed that as a judge of the Land Claims Court, there was corruption. Also, then it was ultimately what is the best vehicle. I would have wanted to finish that because we would have then used it as a test case on what went wrong with this land reform process, and going forward, what vehicles do we put in place to assist people? Because you get people with land back, but they're not able to use it, either because of these poor mechanisms to manage the land or lack of skills to use the land. In Mpumalanga, where my father grew up, in Dakaskrol, they do have the land, but they're not using it. So all of those things would have looked at ultimately what is the best way forward, so that land becomes one of those enabling factors to ensure that people's potentials are freed and their lives are improved. Thank you.
Hi, Angelique from Just Money. I know you were talking earlier about your investigators and how many cases they had to take on. I was just wondering, while you were public protector, you obviously had insight as to what kind of funding you needed while you were there. What, in your view, would the public protector need now in terms of funding and, how many more investigators, etc., would the public protector need to do its investigations and its job properly? Because you seem to be underfunded and understaffed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. we had said to Parliament the public sector would have needed at least 200 million and double the number of investigators that the institution has. Even if we do double, there won't be enough investigators. But part of the work forward was also to shift the model. Instead of us being an ear to every Kokotlamini in the middle of nowhere, we build competent complaints resolution mechanisms closer to communities. So we make sure municipalities have viable complaints resolution mechanisms and government departments have, so that the pub protector is only responsible for the ones that require arm's length from government or to review the decisions of these early resolution mechanisms.
Sorry, was that 200 million a year?
Yes, just that's initial, but that's not all. It needs far more than that. But just to make it really function fairly reasonably. Also, what we had recommended was also a case-by-case injection. That was like a commission of inquiry. When there's a big case that's coming, we cost that case and resources for that case. In that way, then you don't flood it with money it doesn't need, but it has adequate resources to hire interim investigators to deal with those big cases.
Yes.
Hi, Mamutulu Matanzela. I'm Atandiwe from Mail and Guardian. Just to go briefly back to ABSA, if I could. One of the questions we'd like to ask is, why did this investigation take so long? And had the previous SARB governors have anything to do with it taking so long? And was there any new information that was presented in comparison to the previous panels that had investigated this particular issue?
I know what you're trying to do, Atandi. You're trying to get me to discuss what is there in that report. But let me answer the first one about why it took so long. Because I investigated it myself. The system rejected it. And every investigator in the Good Governance and Integrity Unit was overloaded. When Advocate Paul Hoffman persuaded me to do this investigation, I told him that I will investigate it myself, because the team felt strongly that it was out of time, it was going to be difficult to investigate, but also every unit has its hands full. It was only investigated by myself together with an intern. So my first intern, Tevane, left for the prosecution. And after he left, they had no money at the public protector to hire a replacement intern for me. And then beginning of last year, I finally got an intern, and she served with me for about 3 months, and she got called to the bar. She left. And then I got a trainee, Livwani, who then worked with me until he was promoted as an investigator. We did that. So that was fast. It was a resource problem. The second part was we faced a lot of legal issues because everyone had, or most of the people we dealt with, felt that it was no longer, they were no longer answerable for this matter because it was old. So you'll see if you use PIA to ask for the information once the investigation has been concluded, you will see lots of writing back by me to Treasury, to the Reserve Bank, to various parties requesting information or arguing that I have a right to ask for this, that, and that. Then the Reserve Bank also had a secrecy clause around providing information. We had to deal with the legal issues right to them using Section 7(4) of the Public Protector Act to say that from where I'm sitting, that Section 7(4) overrides the secrecy clause which predates the Constitution. Then finding people, because all of them had left government. So we had to schedule and find a time that would be convenient to them and us. That took time as well.
Thank you. All right, I've actually got time for two questions. One is going to be from Terry Crawford-Brown, one from Donald Presley, I'll give him that. Vekiata, you are going to be driving, so you'll have an opportunity to talk. Terry.
Thank you. Sorry, before Terry speaks, sorry, sir. I just want to also say the fact that it took longer does not mean it was less important, but it was less urgent. Because with it, the horse had already bolted. It was a question of collecting whatever we can collect. But with the state capture, we're talking every day you don't investigate that matter. You have a dysfunctional cabinet. Because one person is sitting around this side of the desk suspecting that other one. I didn't understand, for example, this new thing about now white monopoly capital. The second thing was this Rupert. I had no understanding. Why has Mr. Rupert suddenly become important? I don't even think I've met him in real life. But I only discovered yesterday when the ANC was speaking, I think, in the Eastern Cape, they were speaking, and somebody from the Communist Party spoke about the deputy president of the ANC being linked to Rupert, and the president being linked to the Guptas. You see, all of this thing has now been poisoned to individuals. If this matter is investigated, you will see that it is not about these broad political issues, it is about real life events. Factual accounts, what happened, what didn't happen. Is what happened wrong? If it's wrong, how do we fix it? It's just simple. Why was Mr. Nene fired? So you demystify this matter in a commission. So I'm saying why that investigation was important. Had we gotten the money and done it in 3 months, we would have demystified it. It would not have been about Ruperts and things like that. It would have been simple about the firing and hiring of ministers of finance and about the hiring and firing of board members, the award of tenders and award of financial support in government.
Terry.
Thank you. Terry Crawford-Brown. Focus on the Ciex report so far has been limited to the lifeboat scheme. The Ciex report also refers to Arms Corps, where the amounts siphoned out of the country in collusion with the Reserve Bank in the late 1980s, etc., vastly eclipsed the lifeboat scams. Understandably, there were limited resources in the Public Protector's Office, but the Cameron Commission of Inquiry in 94-95 found that Arms Corps was both incredibly incompetent and incredibly corrupt, yet nothing was done about it, and which led into the arms deal saga, which continues. Were you able to open any investigation into Arms Corps, and if not, why not?
Right. As I explained, the request for the investigation was rejected by the Public Protector triaging team, and even under review, we still rejected it until that meeting with Paul Hoffman. I understood Advocate Paul Hoffman to say the low-lying fruit was the ABSA. So we cut it that small. When I met with Mr. Michael Oatley last year, he told me that he'd been talking to the president and he had been talking to Mr. Billy Masetla and showed me communication between him and Mr. Billy Masetla where the president had promised them a commission of inquiry according to Mr. Michael Oatley. That would then have dealt with the entire amount as opposed to what I undertook to do. I only undertook to do ABSA and I did that. AMSCO remains open. As I say, that's the matter that Mr. Michael Oatley had continued to deal with government. But you'll note in the report, when the final report comes out, why the argument from government side, why his report gave problems to them, given the nature of the agreement between him and them. We'll give you 100,000 UK pounds per month to find us the money. And then there's an issue, did he find the money? And I leave it at this stage.
Right, the last question, Mr. Presley.
Donald Presley from Huffington Post today. I get around. Thank you, Thuli, for being with us, and it was a pleasure picking up at the airport yesterday. Just about everyone we bumped into on the way and commenting on Facebook and so forth want to know when you're going to become the president. Do you want to be president of South Africa? And as a corollary of that, can you give us some insight into whether you think that the current corruptees in government, the Zupta class, is going to be swept aside in coming elections in South Africa? We need a message of hope.
Well, firstly, thank you, Donald, for the kind comment. However, I am neither qualified to be president nor interested in that job. I think all of us in life have a purpose. Part of the reasons institutions are dysfunctional is when you take somebody who has been doing a particular thing very competently and you take them like a fish out of water and you place them in something else, they do the best, but their best is not good enough. South Africa does deserve a good president, and I'm glad you've raised that issue, though, that as South Africa struggles to rebuild itself, to find its way back to the North Star that inspired the Pixley Kasemes, the O.R. Tambos, the Mandelas, and all of those that paved the way. We do need a president who will know how to see that North Star and how to work with the broader South Africa to build that united South Africa where everyone's potential is free. Not a South Africa for blacks, not a South Africa for whites. It was terrible to be a Cinderella as a black person under apartheid. But not only was it terrible, it was a recipe for conflict. It would be terrible to create a South Africa where whites now feel like Cinderellas, because that too would be a recipe for conflict. So the president that we elect should be one that makes sure that we build that united South Africa. But that united South Africa has to make sure, though, that there's growth and redistribution. Because as long as the face of poverty is black and female, and the face of wealth is white and male, that too is a recipe for disaster. So we need a president that will do that. Should he be a man? Should she be a female? At this stage, for me, I would say I would love it to be a female, but I would hate to have a female that's a proxy. Because that would be worse than having a man. So, hopefully, whoever is going to be the president is somebody that people like Pixley Kaseme and all of the people that saw a better South Africa many years ago would be happy to see that that person finally is getting us back on track. Somebody similar like O.R. Tambo, who held together an organization in exile without the resources of the police, the army, or the judiciary, but provided that leadership. But why was he able to provide that leadership? Because he walked the talk. When he said, do this, he did so. I know from Ciex, for example, when the Mbokoto, the security forces in the ANC started doing exactly what the apartheid security forces were doing to deal with dissent inside the ANC. President Tambo brought Ciex to come and create a code of conduct to make sure that we are not perpetrators of the same evils that made us take a different path. So that's my hope for South Africa. However, the South Africa we want, colleagues, lies in our collective hands. Wherever we are, each one of us can play a role in ending poverty in this country. Each one of us can play a role in promoting social justice, starting with fees must fall. Imagine if every South African put R5 towards a fee that will make sure that right now, beginning of this year, there are no children or young people who are excluded from university just because they have historical debt. When I spoke to Professor Habib, said at Wits alone, we have about 400 million historical debt. In the other universities, we are talking about 200 million. Yes, some of them are just bad debtors, but many of them are destitute. Just R5 from all of us into a fund could make a difference. And then government should obviously step in and hopefully guarantee that every university that accepts these ones with historical debt will be assisted should things go wrong. That will guarantee my peace, that will guarantee your safety. Because if we don't step in to create a South Africa where everyone's potential is freed, none of us are going to enjoy peace or happiness.
Thank you. As you can hear from the response, you do know that would have made a great inauguration speech. We do have a couple of gifts for you before you leave.
Thank you.
Tony Grogan has done a Technicolor cartoon. Maybe you'd want to show that to the club. And we've got something here for you to keep reports on so that they don't get leaked. And we would like to thank you very, very much on behalf of the club. Thank you.
I was fine with that. Is it? Yeah. You're going to do stuff? Huh? You're going to do stuff?
I don't have anything to do stuff on.